$10,000 a year in dividends sounds like freedom. It sounds like money arriving quietly in your account while you sleep. It sounds like progress without permission. It sounds like you finally escaped the grind. Online, that number gets celebrated constantly. Build passive income. Live off dividends. Replace your paycheck. And psychologically, it makes sense. Dividend income feels different from salary income. Salary feels earned, dividends feel owned, and ownership feels powerful. But here's the uncomfortable truth. $10,000 in dividends will not change your life. Not in the way you think. Let's remove emotion and look at math. To generate $10,000 per year in dividends, you likely need $250,000 invested at a 4% yield, around $333,000 invested at 3%, or significantly more risk if you're chasing 7 to 10% payouts. Even in the balanced scenario, we're talking about $250,000. That's not beginner capital, that's years of consistency. And what does it give you? $833 per month. Before taxes. In most cities, that doesn't cover rent. It doesn't eliminate your job. It doesn't remove financial anxiety. So why does the number feel so powerful? Because it creates the illusion of independence. But income is not independence. Control is. Here's where most people make a subtle mistake. They start chasing yield. They sort ETFs by highest dividend. They gravitate toward 8%, 9%, even 10% payouts. They tell themselves, higher income means faster freedom. But yield can rise for two reasons. The company is paying more. The stock price has fallen. And when price falls because the business weakens, that attractive yield can be a warning sign. If the dividend gets cut, two things usually happen. Your income drops. The stock price drops further. That's not passive income. That's concentrated risk disguised as cash flow. There's another issue most people ignore. When you focus purely on dividend income, you sometimes sacrifice total return. Let's say you build a portfolio yielding 6%, but it grows only 2% per year. Compare that to a portfolio yielding 3%, but growing 7% annually. The second portfolio compounds far more over time, but it feels less rewarding in the beginning because the monthly deposit is smaller. Human psychology prefers visible income over invisible growth. We feel progress when cash hits the account. We don't feel appreciation until we sell. And that emotional bias can distort long-term strategy. So if $10,000 in dividends won't change your life, what will? It's not the income itself, it's the capital required to generate it. Because the real milestone isn't $10,000 per year, it's owning $250,000 plus. Let's zoom out for a second. Imagine two people. Person A earns $10,000 per year in dividends. Person B owns $250,000 in diversified assets, but reinvests everything and doesn't focus on income. On paper, they look similar. In reality, they're playing completely different games. Because the power isn't in the $833 per month. The power is in owning $250,000 that is working independently of your labor. That ownership changes your posture in life. You don't feel it immediately in your lifestyle, you feel it in your decisions. Ownership versus income. Income is a stream. Ownership is a reservoir. A stream can dry up. A reservoir gives you options. When you own $250,000 in productive assets, you can harvest dividends, sell small portions if needed, borrow against assets, reallocate into higher growth opportunities. Let it compound untouched. You're not dependent on the dividend policy of one ETF. You're not emotionally attached to yield. You have flexibility. And flexibility is what reduces financial stress, not just monthly deposits. The optionality effect. Here's what actually changes when you build capital. You stop needing every paycheck. That doesn't mean you quit your job. It means your job loses leverage over you. If your investments cover even 25 to 30% of your annual expenses, something psychological shifts. You negotiate differently, you tolerate less nonsense, you take smarter risks. You might start a business, you might change industries, you might relocate, because you have runway. Dividend income is comforting, runway is transformative. The compounding difference. Let's run the long-term math. $250,000 growing at a modest 7% annually becomes approximately $491,000 in 10 years, approximately $983,000 in 20 years, approximately $1.9 million in 30 years. Without adding another dollar. That's the silent power of total return. Now imagine you were obsessed with maximizing yield instead, and you sacrificed growth to lock in 6% income, but only 2% growth. Over decades, that difference compounds massively. The irony, by chasing income too aggressively, you might delay the very freedom you're trying to accelerate. Why dividend income feels so powerful? There's a reason the dividend narrative spreads so easily. It's visible. Money shows up in your account. It feels like proof. It feels like progress. Growth, on the other hand, is abstract. Your portfolio value fluctuates daily. It's unrealized. It feels less tangible. Humans prefer certainty over potential, so we overweight income and underweight appreciation. But long-term wealth has historically come from a combination of both. With growth doing most of the heavy lifting, dividends are a feature of ownership. They are not the engine. The real life-changing moment, the moment that actually changes your life, isn't when you hit $10,000 in dividends. It's when you realize, I don't need to touch this money. When your investments are no longer survival tools, but strategic assets. When you can let them grow uninterrupted. That's when compounding accelerates. That's when stress declines. That's when time becomes your ally instead of your enemy. And here's the twist. Most people think the goal is to live off dividends as soon as possible. But the real advantage comes from not needing to. Because the longer you delay consumption, the stronger the asset base becomes. So if $10,000 in dividends won't change your life, what actually will? Momentum. Not income. Not yield. Not even passive cash flow. Momentum is when your capital grows faster than your lifestyle. That's the shift. The dangerous shortcut. Many people try to skip the accumulation phase. They want income now, so they structure their portfolio around extracting cash as early as possible. But extraction slows compounding. Compounding needs fuel, and the most powerful fuel in the early years isn't dividends spent. It's capital left untouched. If you reinvest everything instead of consuming it, you increase the speed at which your assets become meaningful. And meaningful is the key word. Because $10,000 per year feels symbolic. But $1 million in appreciating assets feels structural. One changes your monthly cash flow. The other changes your entire financial gravity. The gravity shift below a certain asset level, you are pushing. You save aggressively. You invest consistently. You monitor expenses carefully. It feels like uphill effort. Above a certain level, growth starts assisting you. Your portfolio can gain more in a good year than you contribute. That's when the math becomes exciting. And here's the uncomfortable reality. The people who become financially independent aren't the ones obsessing over dividend payouts. They're the ones obsessing over asset accumulation. Because once the asset base is large enough, income becomes optional and abundant. The order matters. There is a sequence that works. Build stability, emergency fund, build capital, let it compound, then harvest income strategically. Most people try to start at step 4. They want to harvest before the tree has grown, and when the harvest is small, they feel discouraged. But the early phase of wealth building is not about lifestyle change. It's about identity change. You become someone who owns productive assets, thinks in decades, delays gratification, measures progress by net worth, not payouts. That identity compounds harder than dividends ever could. The real life-changing question. Instead of asking, how fast can I generate $10,000 per year in dividends? Ask, how fast can I reach a portfolio size where compounding becomes undeniable? Because once you hit that level, income, dividends, flexibility, all of it, expands naturally. And ironically, when you no longer need the dividends to survive, they become truly powerful. Because then, they are choice, not dependency. Final thought, $10,000 in dividends won't change your life, but building the capital required to generate it without weakening your growth, that will. The goal was never passive income. The goal was independence. Income is a symptom. Ownership is the cause. So here's the real question. Are you designing your portfolio to feel rich or to become free? If this shifted your perspective, the next conversation should be this. How much capital do you actually need before work becomes... There's something else nobody talks about. Dividend income is comforting because it feels predictable. But predictability without scale doesn't create freedom. Scale does. You don't become financially independent because you earn $833 per month from dividends. You become financially independent when your assets are large enough that a bad year doesn't scare you, a job loss doesn't destabilize you, a market drop doesn't threaten your lifestyle. That threshold is not an income number, it's a balance sheet number, and most people are staring at the wrong column. The illusion of passive. Let's be honest, a lot of people are attracted to dividends because they're tired. Tired of work, tired of uncertainty, tired of trading time for money. Dividends feel like escape, but financial freedom is not about escaping work. It's about removing urgency. Urgency forces bad decisions. Urgency makes you take jobs you hate, invest in things you don't understand, sell assets at the worst time. When your capital base is strong, urgency disappears. And when urgency disappears, your decision quality improves. That's where real wealth compounds. The wealth equation. Most people miss wealth isn't built by maximizing income streams. It's built by maximizing capital times time times discipline. Dividends are just a distribution policy. They're not a strategy by themselves. You can become wealthy with dividends. You can become wealthy without them. You can combine both. But if you misunderstand what actually creates financial independence, you'll chase symptoms instead of causes. The cause is asset accumulation. The cause is compounding. The cause is controlling expenses relative to capital. The cause is staying invested long enough for math to overpower effort. Here's the real shift. When you stop obsessing over dividend income and start obsessing over net worth growth, portfolio quality risk management, long-term total return, something interesting happens. The dividend income grows anyway because larger portfolios produce larger cash flows, even at modest yields. A 3% yield on $100,000 equals $3,000, $500,000 equals $15,000, $1 million equals $30,000. Notice what changed, not the yield, the base. The base is everything. The hard reality. If you're currently sitting at $10,000 invested and dreaming about $10,000 per year in dividends, the path is not to increase yield, the path is to increase capital. That means investing consistently, avoiding lifestyle inflation, improving income skills, letting compounding work uninterrupted. It's slower in the beginning, less flashy, less YouTube exciting, but far more powerful. The final question. So I'll leave you with this. If someone handed you a portfolio generating $10,000 in dividends, would that actually change your life, or would owning the portfolio behind it change it more? Because one is income, the other is leverage, and leverage is what rewrites your future. If this perspective helped, the next logical step is this. What portfolio size makes work truly optional? Because once you understand that number, you stop chasing cash flow and start building freedom.